All right, Carolina, thanks so much for being on this podcast. My first question that I have for you is, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you started in the mental health space.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I knew from pretty early on that I wanted to be in the mental health space. I wasn't really sure how I wanted to be in it. I knew I wanted to help people somehow. So I went to school for psychology. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. I just knew I wanted to do something that helped. I knew I wanted to help people. I wanted to do something where I interacted with people constantly. And I actually was certain I wasn't going to be a therapist, even though it sounds like I'm describing a therapist, and I am. I just didn't think that's what I was gonna do. I thought there would be some other way to be in the mental health space. And there are, right? But I took some time off after I graduated, and then the pandemic happened in 2020. We were all there. And end of 2020, I just thought, you know what? This feels like a good time to go back to school. And I feel pretty certain about where I want to take my career, and I feel pretty excited about the thought of being a therapist and being able to support people more of a one-on-one kind of basis, and that's how I ended up here.
hmm Was psychology your first choice, or was it something else? Because I've heard a lot of stories where they're like, I did marketing and then I did something else. It didn't really vibe.
Yeah, no, it was. For what it's worth, my mom went back to school when I was young to pursue psychology. So I feel like and she was a therapist. So I feel like I was exposed to the concept earlier, or, from a pretty young age. So I knew about it. Um, so I actually was undeclared for half of, like the first 2 years of college. But once I declared as a psychology major, I feel like everyone, like my friends and stuff, were like, yeah, we know. I tried to take like criminal justice classes, but they were not. They were not for me. So it's kind of like it was just kind of in the air, like unspoken. It just made sense for me.
hmm So tell me a little bit about, what you do nowadays.
Yeah, so I work at a small private practice, a group private practice in Houston, Texas, and I work with individuals and couples. With couples, I work on, I mean, pretty general, like conflict resolution, communication skills, but I've also really been leaning on working on intimacy issues and desire discrepancy, which is, couples coming in with different intimacy, like libido, difference in drives and just disconnect and difference in or disagreements in their frequency of intimacy or just disconnection in such a way. And with individuals, I work a lot with individuals struggling in their own like sense of, relationships, either romantic relationships or friendships, like attachment styles kind of stuff. So self-esteem, like anything that ties into what entails being in a relationship. That's kind of my jam. That's what I feel the most perked up about or excited about.
So
Mhm.
break those down a little for me, all the relationship stuff, the communication stuff and the sort of the intimacy stuff.
Yeah. So for couples, I feel really passionate about talking intimacy with couples and individuals too, right? But it comes up a lot with couples because I don't feel like there's a lot of spaces where we get to talk about intimacy, right? Intimacy can feel like such a taboo subject, and it's really personal to us, right? And depending on our background and our history, a lot of us just aren't really taught or just shown that we can talk about our intimacy issues or just our experiences with people, right? And so I like to create a safe space where a couple can come in and they can say, we're having an issue with not being intimate enough or not feeling safe being intimate or not having fun, right? Intimacy can be something that and it should be something that can be fun and connecting with, with one another. And so I really like to take something that has been stigmatized as taboo and just crack it open. Let's talk about it. It's something that's in our lives. A lot of us are intimate with others and or with our own selves, right? So let's not pretend. Let's just talk about it. It's part of, especially if you're in a relationship, for most people it's part of your relationship. So I like to make sure it's addressed when working with couples, and I have a lot of fun with it. So it's been a really cool journey, to lean into that part of couples counseling.
Hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating that you mentioned, the intimacy aspect of it, because I think I saw a YouTube video about this sex therapist. She specializes in sex therapy, and
Mhm.
she talked a little bit about her background, and she said that she separated, that she divorced from her husband because her her libido, and this is true, her libido drive, went away, and that it didn't really work out, I guess. I didn't know
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, I mean, sex plays such a big part of relationships, you know what I mean? And honestly, so many times that sex is brought up into a conversation in therapy, it's because I bring it up. Mostly because people don't know that they can. There's been so many times that I've brought it up to a client or a couple, and I see the sense of relief of, "Oh, I can talk about this in here?" And they'll actually, like, ask me, like, "This is okay to talk about?" And once I'm like, "Yes, we can totally talk about this in here," they get this relief of, "Oh my goodness, like, I've never had a space where we could talk about this." And that is a really cool feeling, to give someone a space to talk about something that they haven't had before. Sometimes even that can just be powerful enough, and that's only the beginning, right? So it's just really cool to be able to do that for people.
Hmm. And I have this other question, because this has been on my mind, because I remember I was looking at a comment the other day about some like mental health therapist or something, and
Mhm.
they said something to the effect of intimacy and love. Uh, I think it was, people can only love each other, without intimacy or something like that. What I'm wondering to ask you is, can those two coexist? Can intimacy and love coexist, or is it just two separate things?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think they're definitely related, but they're not the same. I think you can absolutely love someone, and I see this often with couples. You can have two people that absolutely love one another, but they really struggle with a sense of intimacy. And I think something, or part of what can make it so difficult, is that they can be like, someone can get really stuck in the space of, well, we're not being intimate, so do we love each other? Does this person love me? But there's so much more that goes into intimacy other than love, right? It's absolutely a component, but it's not the end all be all. So, yes, they're closely related, but they're not the same.
Hmm. And what do
Mhm.
clients tell you when they sort of come in to visit sessions with you and talk about their struggles with like intimacy or relationship issues?
Mhm. I mean, it varies, right? I think a lot of couples struggle with what we call desire discrepancy, right? Which is where one person in the relationship might feel unsatisfied with the frequency with which they're intimate or they're having sex, while the other person might feel pretty satisfied with the frequency, right? So that might mean that one person comes in and they're saying, we're just not having enough sex, while the other person is totally fine with the amount of sex that they are or aren't having, right? And that's a complicated space to navigate for a couple, right? Because there's no capital, R right number of, this is the amount of times that you should be having sex with your partner, right? And so it's about helping the couple navigate and explore what they want intimacy to look like, what works for them, and what is getting in the way, if something is getting in the way for them as well.
And what modalities do you use to sort of help them through that?
hmm I have done some training on, because sex therapy is pretty extensive, or sex therapy training is pretty extensive. So I've done some formal training through the Institute for Sex Positive Therapy, and there's a little bit of mixed in with some informal training with Gottman training as well. With which Gottman training, or a lot of it, a lot of Gottman training focuses on just kind of forging a path forward together, right? Creating shared meaning, like creating your own goals, creating your own, path together, and making sure that that is the same for two people, right? And then just creating a space that's non-judgmental, right? Again, this can be a pretty sensitive subject to some people. There's a lot of history and weight that can come into these conversations. So creating a space that's just it's open, it's not judgmental, it's soft. Let's talk about it. Let's explore what's really going on here, and let's really peel back the layers on intimacy so that we can really get to the root of, again, what is getting in the way, if something is getting in the way, and how, two people can move forward in a way that works for them.
Hmm. My next question is pretty specific. Like how does the role in movies and TV, sort of portray intimacy, sex and intimacy?
Oh my goodness, I could talk about this forever. I I could talk about this forever. You meaning anybody, right? We've got to be so careful to take everything that we consume in the media with a grain of salt, because movies and TV shows, it's all idealized, right? It's all fantasy. It's all best case scenario. You know what I mean? And so they sell us the fantasy. Do we sometimes have those moments that we see in the movies? Sure, like they are possible, but I think that I've definitely had to do the work with couples and individuals too, when it comes to intimacy, to dispel, like, listen, it's not gonna look like it does in the movies or the TV shows, and that's okay. It's not supposed to, especially when it comes to sex and intimacy. Like, sometimes it's not spontaneous, or sometimes it's a little awkward and a little weird, and there's weird sounds and smells, and it's silly, and that's okay. And so um and then sometimes there's no other space where someone is told, like, you should adjust your expectations, right? So I think that, you know, we've got to be cautious when it comes to the media for sure.
Hmm. And what about when it comes to like teaching courses at academia? Is there a lot of courses in the subject of sex and intimacy? And if not, then what can be done to sort of um teach teach the fundamentals and the basics? Because I learned this in high school. That was a requirement
It,
for graduation.
really?
Yeah,
That is
we took a
not,
public health class and we had to learn all this stuff, that and also body parts and all that stuff.
ooh. Well, where are you located?
Seattle.
Okay. Well, that makes sense because I'm in Texas. So we've had different educations, right? So no, we, especially as a therapist, I know that I took in my grad program, I took an elective class on sex therapy. Not even sex therapy, but just like sexual education. Or I think it was called human sexuality, maybe. Something along these lines. But it was, again, an elective class, and it was just one class. So I've definitely had to do my own, independent learning to lean on this. And like I said earlier, there's a lot of formal, like extensive formal training to be able to call yourself a sex therapist, which I think is good, right? Because again, this is a very sensitive subject to a lot of people. I mean, you definitely want to honor it, and make sure that you're doing your due diligence to educate yourself. Um, but it is a lot of independent work. I do not think that at least my program or my undergrad program really prepared me for it at all.
Mm, I see. My next question is, what have you learned in doing this kind of work?
Yeah, I that's such a sweet question. I was actually just thinking about this last night. I really go into my profession understanding that I, I have such an honor of helping other people, and that is such a big job. And I know, that my clients, they look to me, you know what I mean, in moments of distress or moments of uncertainty. I am also just a human and I learn so much from my clients as well. And I like to remind myself of this because it keeps me humble too, right? I'm in awe of, my clients and my couples who come in week after week and they do the work. And, to see a couple that I've been working with for months, work through something really difficult and come out the other end, or I see that individual client set a boundary. Anytime that you see a client just do the thing, right? Whatever the thing is just so powerful and so inspiring. And so um I think a good therapist will, consistently learn from their own clients and feel inspired by the own people that they work with. I know I for sure do. And it's a pretty good feeling. Um, I think it comes down to human connection too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Now, is there anything that you want to learn in terms of something new within what you're doing now, like that you're very curious about that you haven't
Mhm.
looked at before? Like,
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that is so hard about being in this field. Um, at least it has been for me, right? Becoming a therapist, there's so many areas that I can lean into that for me it's been like I want to do everything, but I also cannot do everything. I'm just a girl. So part of the journey for me as a therapist has been like, okay, let me find something that I want to lean into and let me try it out and let me really give myself the time and space to explore it and then just see how it goes and see where I go from there. And so for me, that has been sex therapy and I'm really content with it and I really want to stick with it for a while and really lean into it even more and get more formal training and then just write it out until the wheels fall off and then as far as maybe in a few years down the road, once I'm able to, I think I would like to become a supervisor, which is where I'm able to have, LPC associates, which is newer therapists who are still working on their clinical hours and just kind of guide them. I think that would be such a fun job.
hmm.
So,
And lastly, what advice would you give to those who want to study sex therapy? I don't know what your experience has been like getting to where you are today, but
yeah,
just like tips, advice.
yeah, I would say to just do your research and, you know, network with people, find some other therapists in the area, just reach out to them, set up some time to just chat, even if it's just 20 minutes online and just get a feel. I definitely know when I looked into it, I felt really overwhelmed again by the requirements and the specifics and the time commitment that it would be to get the formal training. And so, breaking it up with smaller goals, right? To just again, maybe network with some people and just see what their experience has been like. Maybe start by chipping away at some other trainings that are a little bit smaller, easier to digest, and just get a feel for whether, this feels like something you really want to lean into before you commit to the whole bit, right? And so just taking it easy and starting slow and then just going from there.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Okay.